Good evening, all. Tonight I'm going to, I promised I would do this, I'm going to do a review of a movie that a lot of people don't like, but I do, and I always did. And that's David Lynch's Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Some people consider it his masterpiece. I don't, frankly. I think Mulholland Drive is his masterpiece, and I've already done a video on that and given my reasons. But again, I think even a lot of Twin Peaks fans didn't seem to like it when it came out. They didn't like a couple of things. They didn't like the fact that Donna was not played by Lara Flynn Boyle. She was played by Moira Kelly. That's just a logistics thing. Lara Flynn Boyle was filming something else at the time. She wasn't available. Actors get other jobs. It happens. But a lot of them thought it was kind of unnecessary, that they didn't really want to know the backstory of Laura Palmer's last days. I found that interesting. I found the whole thing interesting, though it does have a couple of unresolved loose ends, but ultimately those loose ends were resolved in Twin Peaks The Return. So this kind of opened the doors, and I don't know if Lynch was thinking that far ahead. There's a long time. This was 1993, rather. And he didn't make Twin Peaks The Return until 2017, but obviously he was percolating some of these ideas in his mind anyway at the same time. Lynch's work is subjective, of course, and I think it's meant to be subjective. Like any great art, one person seeing it will see one thing, and another person seeing it will see something completely different. I recently saw a video, well, it was about a year ago actually, of a guy who was just going on and on about. He had the absolute answer to what Twin Peaks was about, and everybody else was wrong. And all I could think while I was watching this guy, and this video is 4 hours, I couldn't watch all of it. I watched about an hour, and I basically said, this is bullshit. And Lynch would absolutely freaking hate this, because this guy was saying, no, I'm right and you're wrong, and if you don't see these things, you're an idiot. And I don't agree with that interpretation at all. Anyway, back to Fire Walk with Me. And just a few notes that I made here about things that I noticed and that were interesting to me. The first was obviously the appearance of the blue rose on Lil's dress. The blue rose is not explained in this movie, but it is in Twin Peaks The Return. A blue rose does not occur naturally. There are no blue roses. I know there's people trying to breed tea roses that are blue, but they're not really, they're not sky blue anyway, like the plastic one that Lil was wearing on her red dress. Those are two colors that are very interesting in Lynch's work because he repeats them a lot. Blue is, for Lynch, I think, a indication of death. And I don't know why he uses blue to equate with death, but he does in several of his works. Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, and the whole Twin Peaks series and the movie. Then, of course, there's the owl ring, which shows up as Teresa Banks's ring in this movie for the first time. It's tied in with the idea of owls being sort of the messengers of these beings from the other world who have crossed over and into our world, and they're sort of a force for evil. And we see the origins of that in Twin Peaks The Return, but it's mentioned, of course, in the third season of Twin Peaks by Deputy Hawk, who is trying to explain the symbology of the owl in his native tradition, and what the owl means, and where they got. And you even see the same symbol, and he says, if you see this symbol somewhere, don't go there. That's a bad place. And it's also a reference to the Black Lodge. The ring plays heavily throughout all of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. It's very important in the overall plot. Also, we see as the two previous FBI agents investigate the murder of Teresa Banks. We get the one played by Kiefer Sutherland, who his name is Sam Stanley, pulls a letter T out from underneath her fingernail. And of course we see a letter R extracted from Laura's fingernail by Agent Cooper later on. This is Bob trying to spell out his name, Robert. Obviously he's killed quite a number of people. Whether it was Leland or Bob inhabiting someone else, we don't really know. We know that he can body jump. as these creatures were able to do. We show more about that in Twin Peaks: The Return, which explains that there's not one, there are two entities, and the other entity, of course, is mentioned here, but not really talked about, and that is the character David Bowie's character, Philip Jeffries mentions. He says, we're not going to talk about Judy, we're not going to talk about Judy at all. Judy, or Jiao De, is a female evil entity who, as we see later in Twin Peaks: The Return, actually entered the young Sarah Palmer. But before she was Sarah Palmer, she was Sarah somebody else. And it's sort of a frog-like creature, or reptilian. And again, it's evil. And that may have influenced some of Sarah Palmer's particular quirks, like the fact that she doesn't notice that her husband has been having incestuous sex with her daughter, or ignored that fact, which would be pretty hard to ignore. Agent Jeffries also says, it's a dream. We're living in a dream. It's a dream within a dream. And that's something that Lynch likes to return to, the idea of a dream within a dream. You know, what's real, what isn't. And those lines are very much blurred in Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. He also mentions that he's been to a meeting, one of quote-unquote their meetings. And by them, they include people like the Log Lady, which I found interesting, and this old woman, the Woodsman. We see the Woodsman for the first time. And the old woman who is named Mrs. Chalfont, and we find out that Mrs. Chalfont is the name of the person who bought the house that the next owners bought it from in the alternate Twin Peaks. The Palmers didn't buy the house, but the lady who did buy it bought it from Mrs. Chalfont. And that was the actual occupant of the house, by the way. It wasn't an actress, which I thought was interesting. And some other things. The character known as the Arm, played by Michael Anderson, the quote-unquote backwards talking dwarf, is all dressed in red. Again, there's the color red. Says to Dale Cooper, is it future or is it past? And he says, do you know who I am? He shakes his head no. He says, I am the Arm, and this is how I talk. I thought that was kind of funny. A little bit of a twin, Lynch having a bit of a joke on us, which I thought another joke that I got instantly, and maybe a lot of people didn't if you're not fans of Laurel and Hardy, but one, the guy played by Kiefer Sutherland's name is Agent Sam Stanley, and at one point the other agent, I'm sorry I don't remember his character's name, asks him, he's holding a cup of coffee in this diner that they went into to ask about Teresa Banks, and he's being kind of a doofus. So the other agent says, Stanley, what time is it? And he looks at his watch and he tilts the coffee and pours it in his lap. That's a direct reference to a Laurel and Hardy skit where Laurel and Hardy are sitting in a bar and Stanley asks Ollie, what time is it? And he says, I don't know. And he's holding the beer and he goes, pours his beer all over his lap. So now he's going to get him back. And he says, Stanley, what time is it? Stanley's wearing his watch on the other side, on this side of his wrist, so he turns his beer mug over and spills it on Ollie's lap again. So, he's can't get a break. I thought that was a direct reference to that scene. I cracked up when I saw that, even in the theater. Other notes that I made here. The relationship between Laura and Bobby, and Laura and James are explored. Her relationship with James seems to be quite a bit more sexual than her relationship with Bobby, which seems more to be centered about his ability to get her cocaine. They're showed kissing a little bit, but she and James are actually shown having sex several times, so that's kind of a more passionate relationship. And of course, James is the one who actually says, I love you. Bobby says it too, but he says it kind of an offhand way. Maybe they did both love her, but I'm not sure. She says to James at one point, I'm all gone, and says to Donna, nighttime is my time. I thought that was kind of an interesting line. She says to Donna says something interesting. They're just kind of talking. She says, "What would happen if you kept falling through space? Would you slow down or speed up?" And Laura says, "Well, I think you'd speed up all the time until eventually you'd burn up and you'd burst into flame forever. And the angels won't help you because they've all gone away." Well, that's kind of an interesting statement. Might have to do with the fact that she feels bleak and desperate and like there's no escape for her from her life situation, both the incest with her father and drugs and other things that are oppressing her, the various relationships that she's in, none of which are particularly happy. Let's see, I made a few notes here. I'm not going to mention that. We see the torn out diary pages, and then she starts, wondering, who Bob is and how he got into her bedroom. She goes to Harold, played by Lenny Van Dolen, who I really like. He's a great actor. He was really funny in one of my favorite Red Dwarf episodes, Back to Reality. He plays a very funny character. Of course, she gives Harold the diary and asks him to keep it. She says in that scene, "Fire, walk with me." They don't read the whole poem, which is interesting. They do in the Twin Peaks, but they don't actually read the whole poem in this. Let's see. Are the old woman and the masked boy agents of Bob? I think they're kind of creatures from that same dimension. The boy tells her that Bob is looking for it says the man behind the mask is looking for the diary, and by that he means Bob. The woman gives her this strange painting of a red door. She has a dream about it later, and in that dream she sees some of these creatures again, including the kid with the weird mask on his face. We find out that Leland had seen that character also when he had gone on a date with Teresa Banks and asked her to bring a couple of her friends, one of whom was Renette Pulaski and the other one was Laura. And when he saw that it was Laura, he freaked out and ran away, but gave her the money anyway. And that's when Teresa started figuring out who he was and started beginning her plot to blackmail him, which is why Leland killed her. I don't think in that instance, even though the murders are pretty much identical, I don't think it was Bob, the entity Bob, who killed Teresa Banks. I think it was Leland because she was blackmailing him, threatening to blackmail him anyway. Laura sees Bob, but Leland leaves the house, and that's kind of freaks her out. And then she's just saying, "It's not him. It can't be him." Up until this point, I guess she's been in sort of a mental fog or again, she's being manipulated by these entities from a different dimension, so that she never really equated Bob with Leland up until that point. And now she's obviously knows, and she's freaking out. Donna's father says, Laura says something funny. Donna asks her if she wants a muffin. She says, "Donna, you are a muffin." Goofy line. Donna's father says to Laura, "The angels will return, and when you see the one that's meant to help you, you will weep with joy." That happens in the final scene. Obviously, I thought it was interesting that it was Donna's father who came up with that, not anyone in Laura's family. Okay, I mentioned that already, so I'm not going to mention it again. In her dream, where she goes through the red doorway, there's a scene where she's in the Black Lodge and Dale Cooper is in there, and he says, "Don't take the ring, Laura." And at a certain point in the dream, she actually has the ring in the palm of her hand, but then later it disappears. And as sort of a reference to that, a voice from her ceiling fan, of all things, says, "You've seen what we can do, i.e. we can make this ring appear and disappear." That's one of the powers of these strange creatures from the other dimension. She sees Annie dead, and Annie says, the good Dale is in the lodge and he can't leave. Write it in your diary. And she appears again in a final scene in the hospital where she says that, and she's talking to a nurse, not Laura, and the nurse takes the owl ring and begins to smile which I thought was kind of eerie. Um, the Ring, again, plays a big role in Twin Peaks: The Return, but I'm not talking about that here. Um, let's see. Dream Within a Dream. I already talked about that. Let's see. Oh, Sarah says at a certain point, asks Laura if she took her blue sweater. And Laura says, "What are you wearing, Mom?" She's wearing the blue sweater. She says, "Oh God, it's happening again." What's happening again? That's kind of an interesting question. Is she losing her mind? Is Judy taking over Sarah at that point so she doesn't remember that she had the blue sweater on? Um, that's kind of an odd scene. Donna asks her at one point when she's getting dressed to go out, she's going to go to the Roadhouse up in Canada, the Bang Bang Bar. And she says, "Where are you going?" She says, "Nowhere fast, and you're not coming." I like that. That's like a line out of a film noir. You know, where are you going? Nowhere fast, and you're not coming. She meets the log lady, and she tells her outside the Bang Bang Bar, she tells her, amongst other things, this type of fire, once it starts, is very hard to put out, and you must be careful, or quote unquote, all goodness is in jeopardy. I think that points out the fact that there is goodness in Laura, but by acting the way that the other entities want her to act, kind of like a slut, she's actually giving them power that they would not otherwise have if she didn't act that way. Jacques Renault says at one point, "There's no tomorrow," which is an interesting statement. Considering Leo kills him like in the next couple of days, or Leland kills him, actually, I should say. He calls her and Ronette my quote-unquote high school sandwich, and I thought that was kind of disgusting. Sarah sees at one point a white horse, and that is referenced again in Twin Peaks: The Return, when the woodsmen keep repeating this odd poem, and one of the lines is, "The horse is the white of the eye." What does that mean? I'm not really certain. It has something to do with their ability to possess people. And maybe the white horse, again, is a reference to Judy, the entity that has possessed Sarah Palm, played by Grace Zabriskie. The one-armed man, when he's like screaming at, I can't remember what his name, Philip, I think his name is, screaming at Leland and Laura at the traffic stop, and he is wearing the owl ring at that point. How he got it, I really don't know, but we do see a scene of him and the arm. The arm, obviously, is his arm, the arm that he chopped off voluntarily, it turns out, because it had also been possessed by one of these strange beings from the other dimension. So maybe that has something to do with why he has the owl ring, because he's connected with these creatures. I talked about that. Oh, in a later scene, Laura is looking at a painting that has an angel in it, and the angel vanishes, and she looks very shocked and upset. Tells James there's no place left to go. You don't know me. Even Donna doesn't know me, some of the things I do. That's a kind of an obvious reference to this sort of secret life that she's been living, a double life. I noted that in the train car, in the final scene, with Laura alive anyway, Leland doesn't kill her until she puts on Teresa's owl ring, because now he equates her with Teresa, somebody who betrayed him. Whether this is Bob or Leland at this point is not really clear. It seems to be indicated by the scenes that it's actually Bob who commits the murder. But it's Leland who gets rid of the body and wraps her in plastic and puts her in the river. In the end, Cooper is in the Black Lodge with Laura, and he's has his hand on her shoulder, and of course she looks up and sees her angel there in the lodge with her, and she smiles and begins to cry, and that ties in, I think, with There's also there's blue light, and then the angel comes in. So blue in this instance is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, and it's red that's bad, and in the red room in the Black Lodge. I think it's a good film. I think it's enjoyable and interesting. And again, this is only my interpretation. And as I said previously, I think Lynch's movies in general are meant to be viewed as art. I do not think there is one answer only. You are free to interpret them as you will, just as you would a work of fine art. If you went to a museum, you would look at it and see what you thought the artist meant to portray. And that's fine. I don't think art needs to be pegged into one little hole like that guy tried to do on that 4-hour video about Twin Peaks. That's ridiculous. You're saying my interpretation's the only one, and if you don't agree with me, you're just wrong. You're looking at it the wrong way. No, art isn't that way. That's not what Lynch intended. I think it's a fine film. I don't think it's Lynch's best, but I don't think it's something awful either. And I think the people who dismissed it as irrelevant are missing something.